Retrofighters D6, featured in today's review, was provided courtesy of Retrofighters. Retrofighters' latest controller, the D6, is a 6-face button Dreamcast pad aimed straight at fans of the system's slew of fighting titles. With added support for PC and Switch, the D6 can serve thousands of games. Retrofighters was kind and sent me a review sample that I have been using for the past 2 weeks, and the experience has been a blast. The D6 box bears a glossy life-size depiction of the D6 on its front, along with branding and compatible systems. 2.4 GHz connectivity is also highlighted. On either side of the box, we get a nice artistic shot of the D6 D-pad and face buttons. Branding and the 2.4 GHz connectivity is in glossy text on the sides as well. On the back is a nice summary of the D6, key highlights of the controller, and a contents list. Opening the box, you'll find the D6, Dreamcast and USB receivers, a braided USB cable, a D6 pin, and finally a quick start guide. At first glance, the D6 looks like a souped up Sega Saturn pad. It has 6 face buttons decked out in the traditional Dreamcast colors and a Saturn style D-pad. The triangle Dreamcast start button is present, along with plus and minus buttons to be used on PC and Switch. L and R shoulder buttons are also present in a purely digital form along the top of the pad, with a sync button and screenshot button taking up residence next to the USB-C charging port. A mode switch is located along the bottom of the D6 to change the function of the controller D-pad from D-pad, left stick, and right stick modes. Every face button in the D6 utilizes a Kale micro switch, which results in a very tactile response. The D-pad likewise features Kale switches, making it easy to tell when you hit each cardinal and diagonal direction. The switches found in the shoulder buttons are less clicky but still feel satisfying to use, as well as the start, plus, and minus buttons. The screenshot and pairing buttons are stiffer than the rest, ensuring they don't activate by mistake. The D6 has an ergonomic design that fits great even in my bigger hands. The curvature allows for index fingers to nicely rest upon the shoulder buttons, with the larger textured grips firmly hitting your palms. My thumbs then nicely angle themselves over the D-pad and face buttons with no straining required to hit anything. The plastic used is firm, and the pad has a good weight and density. Everyday wear and tear is no issue for the D6. Even more dramatic abuse doesn't make it flinch, unlike some of you who are watching this part. I love the smooth versus textured feel of the controller, and the two-tone color scheme of the white D6 gives off that traditional Dreamcast vibe. The included Dreamcast wireless receiver is the same as those included with Retrofighters' wireless striker pads. It features a single slot for plugging in a Dreamcast VMU, or a memory card, with a window to show what's on the display. The base is weighted to keep it from sliding around and gives it a slight angle to see it more clearly on a desk. It can be plugged into a 6-foot extension cable if you need it to be longer. The USB receiver is longer than other Retrofighter USB receivers and features a sync button. Depending on the color option you chose for your D6, the receivers will be color matched. Being a D-pad focused controller immediately sets the precedent for the type of gaming the D6 is meant for. As a result, fighting games are where I started my journey with the D6, and I was not disappointed. On Dreamcast, there are several fighting games to choose from, and everything from Street Fighter Alpha 3 to Soul Calibur has handled beautifully. While it will never be a genre I am amazing at, I have been able to pull off combos with ease, and hitting cardinal or diagonal inputs has been no problem. This has made games like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater equally pleasing to experience with the D6. Gigawing and Resident Evil also make for an excellent use case. Thanks to the D-pad mode switch, the D6 can be used with any Dreamcast game where the analog stick is the main form of input. An 8-way D-pad is less suited for most of these games, but I still had fun messing around with Sonic Adventure 2 or Star Wars Episode 1 Racer. The diagonals in left stick mode are perfectly tuned to match a Dreamcast thumbstick's range, helping with the overall feel. When playing on Dreamcast, the C and Z buttons mirror the R and L buttons by default. I find this use case to be just fine and work for everything I play. Retrofighters, however, has included a macro to activate a true C and Z mode on the D6 to mirror that of the Dreamcast ASCII pad. In this mode, C and Z are mappable in-game as a true C and Z button, and the R and L buttons get disabled. I find this mode curious, but again, I don't see the need for it in my personal use. The VMU works as expected across all titles I tested, with no issues appearing on the display or with saves. The 4X memory card likewise works as expected. Unfortunately, the VM2 has issues functioning with the wireless receiver, but the upcoming 8-bit mods VMU Pro is set to have full compatibility. The D6's built-in rumble has a good strength to it, and it has been a great addition since I am a fan of the feature. As much as I've enjoyed using the D6 on a Dreamcast, my biggest use case for it has been on PC with emulation. With typical PC gaming, the use case is very similar to Dreamcast. I use it for fighting games and various 2D games to great effect. With emulation, however, the D6 is an exceptional input device that I use for PlayStation, Saturn, and everything that came before. The D-pad has been awesome for these retro titles, and the kill switches and the buttons and D-pad give me the satisfaction of hearing my inputs as they occur. Switch is a similar experience, with the NSO app and various retro compilations being my main use case. The left stick mode, however, does make it possible to use the D6 as a great input device for The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, since it doesn't support D-pad input. It is important to note that while in use on the Switch, the D6 defaults to a proper Nintendo button layout, so you will need to be aware of that when playing. Various macros are available across Switch and PC that change around C, Z, L, and R button mappings. The traditional Xbox-style input of having C and Z act as a pair of shoulder buttons and R and L act as the other is certainly my preferred though. Switch can also swap shoulder buttons between C, Z, L, and R, which is extremely useful in some situations. Sadly, this macro is not on PC. PC users can also swap the D6 between X input and direct input modes of use to ensure compatibility with older games. The direct input mode also allows the D6 to be compatible with the PS3. Inputs respond promptly across all supported platforms, with input latency measuring at 5 milliseconds on average during wireless use and 2 milliseconds on average when wired on a PC or Switch. Unfortunately, Dreamcast users have no way of wiring the pad to their systems, but inputs still fall well under a frame, so it shouldn't cause issues for most. Your display may be a bigger concern where input latency is concerned, so do be aware of that. I also never experienced interference while using the D6, despite it having a few wireless devices near the receiver to contend with. Battery life with the D6 lasts over 12 hours per charge. My only complaint with the D6 to date is that the shoulder swapping macro function available on Switch can't be used on PC. On the Mega Man X Legacy Collection, Mega Man X 1 through 3 can only map controls to R and L, which translates to the C and Z buttons of the D6, and not R2 and L2, which are the D6, R, and L. I like being able to use the shoulder buttons for dashing, which just isn't possible without the swapping macro. Again, on Switch, this is not an issue, and you can swap them back and forth as desired, so I hope the functionality makes its way to PC in a future update. The Retro Fighters D6 is my favorite D-pad focus controller to date. Performance is top-notch with low latency achieved with its 2.4 GHz connection and punchy buttons thanks to its scale switches. The D-pad being usable as both a D-pad and left analog stick gives it functionality for games that didn't explicitly support a D-pad but should have, giving a sense of better control. Being usable on Dreamcast, PC, and Switch also expands its usefulness with PC emulation and retro compilations being my #1 use case. While the asking price is a bit high, the build quality and performance more than justify it. If you are looking for a D-pad focus controller for fighting games or emulation, this is the one to look at. So those have been my thoughts on the Retro Fighters D6 Gamepad. It is just a really fun controller to use, and I've really been liking them on my PC for emulation as previously stated. But again, fans of Dreamcast fighting games are sure to get a lot of use out of these, and just a big thank you to Retro Fighters for sending out these retail samples for us to review on the channel and share with you all today. I'm going to go ahead and call it here for this one. Thank you all so much for watching today's review. Hope you found it informative, and please be sure to check out the D6 with the links in the description below. Now, just the usual favors here at the end. Thumbs up, thumbs down, depending how much you like today's review. And then be sure to hit that sub button notification bell so you can see when new videos go live on the channel. And if you'd like to further help support us to keep this content coming your way, please check out that join button here on YouTube or the Patreon link that'll appear in the bottom left part of your screen. Every little bit helps, and we are grateful to all of our incredible backers. Thank you all so much for believing what we do here. But until next time, my wonderful internet peeps, you all stay awesome, keep on gaming, and we'll see you back next video.